Emily's eyes fluttered open, her vision blurred and her head pounding with a relentless ache. The air was thick with the stench of mildew and something far more sinister. As her senses slowly returned, she realized she was in a dimly lit, cold, and damp room. Her wrists were bound tightly to a rusty metal chair, the coarse rope biting into her skin. Panic surged through her veins as she struggled to remember how she had ended up in this nightmarish place. The last thing she recalled was leaving work late at night, the city lights casting long shadows on the empty streets. The room around her was a macabre gallery of horror. Various torture devices, each more horrifying than the last, lined the walls. Iron maidens, racks, and other grotesque instruments of pain loomed in the shadows, their presence a silent testament to the suffering they had inflicted. Emily's heart raced as she took in the scene, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She had to get out of here, but how? Her captor, a deranged man known only as the surgeon, was a figure of nightmares. Tall and gaunt, with hollow cheeks and eyes that gleamed with a twisted sense of pleasure, he moved with an eerie grace. His hands, long and slender, were always meticulously clean, a stark contrast to the blood-stained apron he wore. The surgeon believed that true beauty could only be revealed through suffering, and he took a perverse delight in his work. His voice, when he spoke, was soft and almost soothing, a chilling counterpoint to the horrors he inflicted. Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to escape. She knew she had to stay calm, to use her wits and resourcefulness to navigate the room's deadly traps and puzzles. Each clue she uncovered would reveal more about the surgeon's past victims and his macabre obsession. She had to be careful, though. One wrong move could mean the difference between life and death. As she struggled against her bonds, Emily's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she began to notice details she had missed before. The walls were covered in crude drawings and notes, scrawled in what looked like blood. They told the stories of the surgeon's previous victims, their fates sealed by his twisted sense of artistry. Emily shuddered as she read the accounts, her heart breaking for the souls who had suffered before her. Suddenly, a cold breeze brushed against her cheek, and she turned to see a faint, ghostly figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a young woman, her face pale and her eyes hollow. She looked at Emily with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "You must listen," the spirit whispered, her voice barely audible. "We are here to help you." Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized she was not alone. The spirits of the surgeon's previous victims haunted the room, offering cryptic advice and warnings. They were her only hope. With their help, she began to piece together the key to her escape. Each spirit had a story to tell, a clue to offer. They guided her through the room's deadly traps, their voices a constant presence in her mind. Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Emily's anxiety grew with each passing moment, the weight of her situation pressing down on her. She knew that time was running out. The surgeon was growing impatient, his footsteps echoing through the halls as he moved closer to her prison. She had to act fast. With the spirit's guidance, Emily managed to free herself from the chair. Her wrists throbbed with pain, but she pushed the discomfort aside, focusing on the task at hand. She moved cautiously through the room, her eyes scanning for any clues that might lead to her escape. The spirits whispered in her ear, their voices a lifeline in the darkness. As she navigated the room, Emily uncovered more about the surgeon's twisted mind. He had been a brilliant surgeon once, renowned for his skill and precision. But something had snapped inside him, turning his genius into madness. He became obsessed with the idea of beauty through suffering, believing that only through pain could true art be created. His victims were his canvas, their agony his masterpiece. Emily's heart ached for the souls who had suffered at his hands. She vowed to make sure their deaths were not in vain. She would escape this place and bring the surgeon to justice. But first, she had to survive. The final clue led her to a hidden door concealed behind a tapestry of grotesque images. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open, revealing a narrow passageway. She could hear the surgeon's footsteps growing louder, his voice a low murmur as he spoke to himself. She had to move quickly. The passageway was dark and claustrophobic, the walls closing in around her. Emily's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the spirit's presence, their whispers urging her on. She had to keep going. She had to escape. At the end of the passageway, Emily found herself in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with jars of preserved body parts. Her stomach churned at the sight, but she forced herself to focus. There had to be a way out. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror. Emily approached it cautiously, her reflection staring back at her with wide, fearful eyes. As she reached out to touch the glass, the mirror shimmered and a figure appeared behind her. It was the surgeon, his eyes gleaming with a twisted delight. "Ah, my dear Emily," he purred, his voice sending chills down her spine. "You've been quite the challenge, but the game is over now." Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to outsmart him. She knew she couldn't fight him physically. He was too strong. She had to use her wits. She had to be clever. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "The game is just beginning." The surgeon's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Emily seized the moment, lunging forward and grabbing a jar from the shelf. She hurled it at the mirror, the glass shattering with a deafening crash. The room was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering flames of the candles that lined the walls. Emily moved quickly, her hands searching for anything she could use as a weapon. She found a scalpel, its blade gleaming in the dim light. Emily's heart raced as she faced the surgeon, the scalpel trembling in her sweaty grip. The room reeked of rust and decay, the flickering candlelight casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The surgeon's eyes gleamed with malice as he circled her, his blood-stained apron swishing with each step. "You think you can outsmart me, my dear?" He purred, his voice dripping with venom. "I've perfected this game over years. You're just another canvas for my art." Emily's breath came in short gasps, her muscles tense and ready to spring. She could hear the spirits whispering urgently in her ear, their voices a cacophony of warnings and encouragement. The weight of their suffering pressed down on her, fueling her determination to end this nightmare. The surgeon lunged forward, a glint of metal flashing in his hand. Emily ducked, feeling the whoosh of air as the blade narrowly missed her face. She countered with a wild swing of her scalpel, catching the edge of his arm. A thin line of red appeared, and the surgeon hissed in pain and surprise. "First blood to you," he snarled, his calm demeanor cracking, "but it will be your last victory." They danced a deadly waltz around the room, trading blows and near misses. Emily's arms ached from the exertion, her lungs burning as she gasped for air. The surgeon seemed tireless, his attacks growing more frenzied and unpredictable with each passing moment. Emily's foot caught on a loose floorboard, and she stumbled. The surgeon seized the opportunity, driving forward with his blade. She twisted at the last second, but not fast enough to avoid the searing pain as the knife sliced into her side. Warm blood trickled down her skin, and she bit back a cry of agony. The spirits' voices rose to a fever pitch, their urgency palpable. Emily gritted her teeth, pushing through the pain. She feinted left, then spun right, catching the surgeon off guard. With a desperate lunge, she plunged her scalpel deep into his chest. The surgeon's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. He staggered backward, his hands clutching at the wound. "Impossible," he wheezed, blood bubbling at his lips. You can't." Emily watched as he collapsed to the ground, his body twitching and then going still. The room fell silent, save for her ragged breathing and the fading whispers of the spirits. Exhausted and in pain, Emily stumbled towards the exit, leaving bloody footprints in her wake. She pushed open the heavy door, expecting to feel the cool night air on her face. Instead, she found herself in another dimly lit corridor, lined with more doors and sinister devices. A chill ran down her spine as a familiar voice crackled over hidden speakers. "Congratulations, Emily," the surgeon's voice said, sounding very much alive. "You've passed the first test, but the game is far from over. Welcome to level 2. Emily's heart sank as the door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing ominously through the corridor. She sank to her knees, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She wasn't free. She had never been close to escaping. This nightmare was only beginning, and the surgeon was still very much in control. As the gravity of her situation settled in, Emily couldn't help but wonder, how many more levels would she have to survive? And would she ever truly escape the surgeon's twisted game? The walls seemed to close in around her, the oppressive darkness whispering the cruel truth. This was no ordinary escape room. This was a labyrinth of torment, designed to break her spirit and test her will to survive. And as she stared down the endless corridor, Emily realized that the true horror was not just the traps and the pain, but the chilling uncertainty of whether she would ever find her way out.